At the banquet, my fiancé had his arm around another woman, publicly humiliating me. My grandfather only agreed to let me marry you because your parents shamelessly begged him back then, he sneered. Did you really take it seriously? How utterly disgraceful. Laughter erupted all around. But the very next second, their laughter was stilled by a collective gasp of disbelief, because the so-called flower on the cliff, heir to the most powerful family in Port City, had dropped to one knee. In his hand was a ring worth hundreds of millions, and he was proposing to me. Danny ground his teeth. Jenny, I dare you to say yes. You're my fiancé. In the face of his threat, I simply smiled and, without hesitation, reached out and slipped the ring onto my finger. Jenny, sing a song to liven things up for my friends. Ever since he agreed to the engagement between our families, Danny would call me to entertain his friends at every one of their gatherings. He called it livening up the atmosphere, but it was really just humiliation. I was the principal dancer of the city ballet troupe, and the only daughter of the Reed family from Sea City. When I first came to the capital, our foothold was still unstable. The Brown family, Danny's family, with whom I had a childhood engagement, had already gained significant standing here. To support the Reed family's struggling business, my family presented the old engagement contract. Though the Brown family looked down on our meager fortune, they didn't want to be seen as dishonorable in elite social circles. So under the witness of both families, I was engaged to Danny, the second son of the Brown family. I never wanted to use my marriage as a bargaining chip. But Danny had grown up with me. When he was young, he was fostered in our home, and we became inseparable. Back then, he often told me he would marry me someday. Yet, when the engagement became official, all I could see in his eyes was undisguised loathing. From then on, at every social occasion, I became the target of his mockery and public humiliation. Even though I had a respectable name in the dance circle, to him, I was nothing more than a showgirl, a performer unworthy of the spotlight. Expressionless, I would walk up on stage, sing whatever song he chose, and then leave the room with my eyes fixed straight ahead as the crowd laughed behind me. Jenny must really be hopelessly in love with young Master Brown, they'd say. Standing outside the room was Tom, the young master of Port City and heir to the most powerful century-old family in the capital, the Miller family. Known as the flower on the cliff, young Master Tom leaned against the wall with his arms crossed, watching me with mild amusement. Aren't you going in to join the fun? I didn't answer. I simply stepped aside and made way for him. With all their IQs combined, they might not break 3 digits. I find Jenny far more interesting, he said with a smirk, a flicker of disdain flashing across his face at the mention of Danny and the others. Though a prince of Port City, Tom rarely frequented such noisy venues. The chaos clearly made him uncomfortable. I followed him into the sleek black Bentley parked outside. The chauffeur closed the door behind us, shutting out the noise. Tom reached out and picked up a strand of my hair, twirling it lazily around his finger. That useless Danny, how did he ever win your favor? Even when he treats you like this, you remain so composed. And what does young master think I should do? I smiled and leaned in, resting a pale arm on his shoulder, letting his hand that toyed with my dark hair slide down to encircle my slender waist. Tom seemed pleased with my frankness. I like talking to smart people like you, Jenny. One word is all it takes. Consider this me doing you a favor, helping you see Danny's true face. His strong hand drew me in closer. The confined space of the car was slowly filling with a dangerous heat. I subtly pulled back, tilting my head as I looked at him. Perhaps you've got the wrong person, young master. The Reed family is barely surviving in the capital only because of the Brown family. Exposing my own fiancé isn't exactly a noble act. Then the Reed family can rely on someone else. His slender fingers gently brushed my carefully made-up face. I waited quietly for his next words. I wonder, would the Miller family be good enough for Jenny? I took Tom's pale, elegant hand in mine and smiled sweetly. I'd be honored. To protect our family business, I'd watched my parents, and my aging grandfather, humble themselves time and again. I was their only child. When my mother gave birth to me, she suffered lasting complications and couldn't conceive again. My father, heartbroken, refused to let her go through that pain a second time. Before coming to the capital, I had been a carefree girl, pouring myself wholly into dance. But after arriving here, the Reed family had struggled at every turn. Those in the elite circle looked down on us as small-town nobodies. Once considered prominent in Sea City, the Reed family had become cornered on all sides. My engagement to Danny became our only way to survive. I still remember the first time we visited the Brown family. The housekeeper didn't even bother to acknowledge us. Clearly, it was intentional, a signal sent from the top. Yet, years ago, when the Brown patriarch and his wife took their eldest son to build a life in the capital and left their younger son, Danny, in our care, we treated him as one of our own. But now that we needed help, all they gave us was disdain. In the end, my elderly grandfather had to come forward and personally plead for the marriage to be honored. The Brown family basked in the prestige, and then turned around to gather their allies and mock us. To say I didn't resent it would be a lie. But I couldn't bear to watch my parents, who had come to the capital full of hope, lose everything they'd worked for. So I endured it all in silence. Whenever people asked how things were going between Danny and me, I would smile and lie, pretending we were in love. My phone lay silently at my side. Since I left the bar that night, he hadn't even bothered to send a perfunctory message asking if I got home safely. I still remember how, when I got lost at the market as a child, Danny searched for me so frantically that he tripped into a canal. Covered in bruises, he didn't stop until he found me, only then did he collapse in tears. In the mirror, my face looked stunning as ever, but the exhaustion behind my eyes could no longer be hidden. The next day, an email arrived in my inbox. Just as I opened the email, my phone rang. It was Tom. "Got the email?" he asked. After I confirmed, he continued, "These are the recent projects Danny supposedly secured. Honestly, he can't even draft a proper proposal. As for how he got those investors to sign, well, Jenny, you're about to find out." "I really must thank young Master Miller for his thoughtful effort," I said, chuckling as I scrolled through the photos, each one of Danny with a different woman clinging to him. Tom wasn't the least bit bothered. Just doing what any decent person would, helping when I see injustice. Feigning admiration, I replied playfully, "I didn't expect young Master to be so broad-minded. Clearly, I've been too narrow in my thinking." After deleting the call log, I sat down at my vanity and carefully began getting ready. Today was Mr. Brown's birthday banquet. As the so-called future daughter-in-law of the Brown family, I was expected to attend. Even in a custom-made designer gown, not a single person came to greet me when I arrived at the Brown residence. No doubt, everyone in this household was eagerly anticipating my humiliation. I lowered my head, smoothed out my skirt, and entered with the gift I had prepared for Mr. Brown. My appearance made the lively banquet hall go quiet for a beat, but only a beat. Then Danny's friends loudly called out to him from across the room. "Hey, young Master Brown, your talented fiancé has arrived." Laughter erupted around me again. Everyone in this circle knew Danny didn't care for me. Only our family remained the butt of the joke. I showed no reaction, so the instigator lost interest, rolled his eyes at me, and walked off. Danny walked over, face dark. "What are you doing here?" Clearly, I had not received an invitation. Still, I smiled politely. "Today is Uncle Brown's birthday. As your fiancé, isn't it only right that I come to offer my well wishes?" Danny sneered, like father, like daughter, no shame at all. "Danny, enough nonsense," Mr. Brown cut in, stopping him from going further. Spreading rumors was one thing, openly slandering me in public was another. "Uncle Brown, I wish you boundless blessings and a long, prosperous life." I handed him the gift. Mr. Brown took it with a forced smile and casually passed it to the butler standing nearby. Just then, Danny spotted a property tycoon who had just arrived at the door. Suddenly, his attitude shifted. "You're right. As my fiancé, this is exactly your place." He offered his hand in a gentlemanly gesture. I pretended to be pleased and placed my hand in his, though I didn't miss the flash of malice in his eyes. Danny led me straight to the tycoon. The man, overweight and sweating, lit up the moment he saw me. "Mr. White, allow me to introduce my fiancée, Jenny." Danny signaled for me to shake hands. I had barely extended my hand before the greasy man grabbed it with both of his, kneading it as he chuckled. "Ah, young Master Brown, you're truly blessed. Such a beauty at your side. I imagine the nights are full of pleasure, Their crude words made my stomach churn. I resisted the urge to recoil, subtly pulled my hand away, and found it damp with his oily sweat. Muttering something about needing to touch up my makeup, I walked quickly toward the restroom. Once inside, I scrubbed my hand furiously, scrubbed it as if I could erase the feel of their skin, their filth. As I remembered how Danny had deliberately pushed me toward Mr. White just moments ago, my heart sank. Now I understood how he managed to secure those deals. Tom had already hinted as much. But no matter how little he cared for the past we shared, I was still his fiancée in name. And yet, he treated me like a pawn to be offered up to anyone with money and power. That calculating, soulless man bore no resemblance to the boy I once knew, the one who used to promise to marry me with such sincerity. How had Danny become this person? I sent Tom a quick message and returned to the banquet, pretending nothing had happened, though I could feel a pair of lustrous eyes glued to me the entire time. Just to be safe, I avoided all food and drinks at the party. As I was about to leave, a server accidentally brushed past me, spilling red wine down my gown. The pale champagne-colored dress was quickly stained in dark red streaks, the liquid dripping slowly down my bare, fair legs. "I'm so sorry, Miss Jenny. Please, let me take you to the dressing room so you can change," the server apologized hastily. I looked down at the mess on my dress, and suddenly, it all made sense. What a lowly trick. I forced a look of mild embarrassment and replied, "Then I'll trouble you to lead the way." The server brought me to the most secluded dressing room at the end of a hallway, closed the door behind me, and left. Once I was sure he was gone, I quietly slipped into a different changing room nearby. As expected, moments later I heard voices from the next room. "Where is she?" Mr. White's irritated voice rang out, followed by Danny's somewhat flustered reply. "Maybe she didn't bother changing and just left. Next time, I'll personally bring her to entertain you." "Young Master Brown," Mr. White said flatly, "I heard your father is considering handing the business over to your cousin." Listening from the other side, I suddenly understood everything. Danny had once had an older brother, a prodigy in business. He was the one I was originally supposed to marry. But fate had other plans. While abroad on a business trip, his brother died in a tragic plane crash, his body never recovered. Danny was no match for his brother, and Mr. Brown clearly didn't trust him with the company. So he began grooming Danny's cousin instead. That's why Danny had been so desperate to prove himself, resorting to any means necessary. Only after Danny repeatedly promised that I would personally entertain Mr. White did the man finally give up and leave the room. Once it was quiet again, I slipped out of hiding, trembling with rage and disgust. Before, I thought Danny simply resented our arranged marriage. But now I realized, he truly saw me as something disposable. A bargaining chip he could hand over to anyone. Even though I had tried to prepare myself for this, the bitterness surged uncontrollably. Tears slipped down my cheeks. I wiped my face roughly and turned to leave, only to run straight into a solid chest. My heart sank. Danny must have come back. I took a few quick steps back. But when I looked up, I let out a breath of relief. "I thought you said you weren't coming," I said. For a brief moment, I thought I saw a flicker of concern in Tom's eyes. Must have been my imagination. I turned to push open the dressing room door to leave, but before I could step out, he pulled me back. "What are you doing?" I stumbled, nearly falling, and shot him a glare. But then I followed his gaze. My champagne-colored dress was now stiff with dried wine, the blotchy red stains marring the hem. "You're seriously planning to walk out like that? Do you think this place has anything for me to change into?" I snapped. Suddenly, Tom began taking off his clothes. My internal alarm bells rang instantly. "Stop! What are you doing?" Seeing how guarded I looked, he seemed all the more amused. His pace slowed as he loosened his tie, deliberately moving closer. What was this, escaping the wolf only to fall into a tiger's den? Backed into a corner, I finally just closed my eyes and braced myself. Well, if I had to be taken advantage of, at least Tom was handsome. It wouldn't be the worst thing that could happen tonight. But then, I heard a low chuckle above me. "What kind of nonsense is spinning in that little head of yours?" Only then did I realize, he was messing with me. I bolted upright, furious. "You're the one with nonsense in your head. It's overflowing in there." Perhaps it was the unfamiliar high heels, but the moment I took a step, I lost my balance and started to fall. But the expected pain never came. Tom had caught me. In the dim light of the dressing room, I landed squarely on top of him. Our body heat seeped through the thin fabric between us. For a moment, the only thing audible was our breathing. My palm rested against the firm muscles of his chest. I couldn't resist giving them a quick squeeze. Tom's breath hitched slightly, and I could feel the temperature rising. Just as he opened his mouth to speak, I patted his chest with a satisfied smile. "You've got quite the reflexes, hero." After a beat of silence, Tom rolled me off and tossed a jacket over my head. "Cover your dress with this." Outside, the band had begun playing birthday music again. Sure enough, when we opened the door, the lights in the banquet hall had dimmed slightly for the performance. Taking advantage of the distraction and darkness, Tom and I slipped out of the Brown residence unnoticed. My phone buzzed incessantly in my bag. It was Danny, sending message after message, each one nastier than the last. "A fallen family like yours wants to act like some rich madam? You really think you've secured your place as my fiancé?" I left every message on read, but said nothing. Perhaps my silence drove him mad, because soon he began threatening me with the engagement. As I scrolled through his rants, it felt like I was watching a clown perform, a man who desperately wanted to destroy me but could do absolutely nothing. "Aren't you afraid he'll actually cancel the engagement?" Tom asked, watching me calmly sip tea. "The Reed family won't survive long in the capital without it." I met his gaze, composed and unbothered. Did he really think being obedient and marrying into the Brown family would save the Reed name? The thought of Danny's arrogant commands these past weeks made my eyes darken. "That's why you agreed to work with me so readily," Tom said, half smiling. "Jenny, with that kind of personality, you'd be formidable in business." His eyes shimmered with admiration. I smiled gently in return, but gave no reply. The car stopped smoothly in front of my home. I took off the jacket he had lent me and handed it back. Thank you for everything today, I said, watching his car disappear into the night. Tom's voice still echoed in my ears. Everyone believed a woman's value came from marrying into a powerful family, to lift up her own. That's why, even though I knew the Browns didn't think much of me, even though Danny humiliated me over and over again, I had still accepted the engagement. The evening breeze was cold. I stood outside for a long time. Only when my legs began to ache did I finally turn and walk back inside, collapsing into the soft embrace of my bed. Exhaustion swept over me. I drifted into a deep sleep. Danny's little plan, to use me to charm investors, had failed, and he ignored me for days. Jenny, how come I haven't seen you go out lately? Did you have a fight with Danny? Grandpa finally asked, unable to hide his concern. I had been lounging around the house, moving between the bed and the sofa for days. I stretched lazily. He's been busy with business meetings. I wouldn't understand any of it anyway, so I didn't want to get in the way. Grandpa sighed, as if suddenly reminded of the Reed family's recent business troubles. When you and Danny get married, make sure to ask him to lend more of a hand. The boy has made some progress lately. Not wanting to worry him, I nodded sweetly. These days, girls can take the initiative too, you know. Don't always wait for the man, he added, still nagging lovingly. I listened with a mixture of affection and mild embarrassment. Just then, my phone rang. It was Danny. With Grandpa sitting right beside me, I had no choice but to pick up. There's a banquet tomorrow at the International Hotel. If you still want to stay engaged, show up. He didn't even wait for my response before hanging up. Grandpa looked at me with hopeful eyes. But in my ears, Danny's cold voice echoed. Was this really the kind of marriage I had to settle for? The call log showed the entire conversation lasted only a few seconds. I sat there, lost in thought. On the day of the banquet, I arrived at the hotel at the time Danny had specified. To show respect for the Brown family's invitation, my family had hired one of the most famous stylists in the capital to do my makeup and dress me. The moment I entered the hall, familiar and unfamiliar faces alike turned to look at me. Some were odd, some hostile, some openly dismissive. They looked me up and down like I was on display. Looks like young Master Brown hit the jackpot. Even if she just sat at home and looked pretty, it'd be worth it. Please. A girl whose whole family begged for this marriage? I wouldn't take her even if she were a goddess. Whispers surrounded me. Thanks to Danny's efforts, everyone in our social circle knew how pathetically my family had begged for this engagement. What they didn't know was that years ago, it was the Brown family who had begged us to care for Danny. Hearing my family being mocked again, I, usually calm as water, felt my nose sting. Well, young Master Brown. She actually showed up, came a deliberately saccharine voice from nearby. I took a deep breath, adjusted my expression, and looked up. My fiancé, Danny, was walking toward me with his arm wrapped around a woman in a tight, revealing cocktail dress. His hands roamed freely over her body, drawing playful giggles from her lips. The mask of composure I had worked so hard to maintain shattered in an instant. Danny, I don't care what you do in private, I said coldly. But you were the one who invited me tonight. I stared at the couple before me, their blatant intimacy a public display meant solely to disgrace me. Danny was clearly delighted to see a crack in my expression. Oh, come on, he sneered. Your parents begged my grandfather back then, practically on their knees. And you really thought I'd actually want to marry you? Shameless. His mocking words exploded in my ears. I thought I had grown numb to his cruelty by now, after enduring so many humiliations. But this was the first time Danny had insulted me so blatantly in a formal setting. It was like falling into an icy abyss. Laughter erupted all around. Eyes stinging, vision blurring, I only wanted to escape. But suddenly, the laughter stopped. A pair of warm hands wrapped gently around my shoulders. I turned, Tom. I looked at him, puzzled, only to see him curl his lips into a lazy smirk directed at the crowd. Then, to the shock of everyone present, the aloof young master of Port City, the infamous flower on the cliff, dropped to one knee. From his pocket, he pulled out an exquisite ring box. My heart pounded uncontrollably. He opened the case, revealing a dazzling diamond ring. The very same crowd that had been mocking me seconds ago gasped audibly. The ring was a one-of-a-kind piece from a world-renowned couture brand, rarely released and worth billions. The banquet hall fell so silent, you could have heard a pin drop. Tom cleared his throat. His deep, earnest eyes locked on mine. Miss Jenny, will you marry me? As one of the two protagonists in this surreal scene, I stood frozen. Then Danny's furious voice tore through the silence. Jenny, I dare you to say yes. You're my fiancé. I smiled softly. And without hesitation, I reached out and put the ring on my finger. I will. What was meant to be Danny's carefully orchestrated humiliation had turned into a public declaration of my engagement, to a man none of them could even dream of matching. Ignoring the storm of expressions behind us, I took Tom's hand and walked out of the banquet hall with him, head held high. Once inside the car, I immediately tried to take off the ring. But it fit my finger perfectly, like it had been custom-made for me. Feeling slightly awkward, I turned to Tom with an embarrassed smile. Maybe I'll figure out how to take it off once I get home. Tom chuckled and gently pressed down on my hand. Keep it. It's yours. I shook my head. I can't accept something this valuable for nothing. I'll transfer you the money later. It's quite unique. And clearly expensive. The usually cool and reserved heir suddenly grinned with a roguish air. It's not that much. Just a couple billion. If the car windows had been open, I would have evaporated on the spot. Well, if you really can't afford it, he added playfully, you could always pay with yourself. His handsome face suddenly loomed closer. I could feel the heat of his palm pressed against the small of my back, growing warmer by the second. That's quite the joke, I stammered, forcing a dry laugh from my throat. No rush. Take your time deciding. The driver, all too familiar with the route by now, smoothly pulled up to my house. Tom had already returned to his seat, waving at me with a smile as I got out. My legs felt like jelly as I stepped inside. The whole evening had been so fantastical, it felt like a dream. The next morning, I came downstairs to find my parents and grandfather already seated at the table. Oddly, none of them greeted me as they usually did. A wave of unease crept in. Jenny, my father began, what's going on between you and the Miller family? Their expressions were grave. Clearly, last night's spectacle had already made its rounds and couldn't be kept quiet. I'm going to break off the engagement with Danny, I said calmly. Because of Tom? Grandpa asked, his hand trembling as he pointed at the glittering ring on my finger. My parents stood immediately to help him calm down. I know the Miller family is more powerful than the Browns, he said, voice strained. But how could you do something so disgraceful to our family's name? From the look on his face, it was clear they all thought I had betrayed Danny in pursuit of wealth and status. But do any of you know what Danny has done? The anguish I had been holding in finally burst free, my voice already hoarse from emotion. I poured out everything I had been through. When I was done, silence filled the room. My mother reached out and took my hand. Do you still have feelings for him? Maybe I did once. After all, we had grown up under the same roof. I still remembered the day he was taken back to the capital, vowing solemnly that he'd return one day and marry me. But that childhood affection had long been eroded by his cruelty. He used the engagement to threaten me. He made me dance before his wealthy friends like a performer. I didn't want to dance anymore. I threw myself into my mother's arms and broke down in sobs. Her eyes turned red as she gently stroked my hair. You poor child, you've suffered enough. After finally telling my family everything, I felt as if a heavy weight had been lifted from my chest. Grandpa slammed his palm on the table. Come. We're going to the Brown family right now and ending this. For years, they had cherished me like a precious gem. Who would have thought marrying into the Browns would lead to such humiliation? But before we could leave, Danny's sports car came barreling into our driveway. He looked disheveled, his face clouded with angry despair. Jenny, he said, voice harsh, come back with me right now and apologize to my father. If you do, I'll forget everything that happened yesterday. I was stunned. Yesterday, he had publicly paraded another woman around, mocking me. And now he wanted me to go and beg for forgiveness? Was he insane? I looked at him, held back for a moment, and then finally snapped. I raised my hand and slapped him across the face. Danny's head snapped to the side from the slap, his face full of disbelief. Are you insane? How dare you hit me? I'm your fiancé. Seems like young Master Brown has a short memory, I replied coolly. I accepted Tom's proposal yesterday. What kind of fiancé are you now? Danny's eyes went bloodshot, his teeth clenched so tightly I could hear them grind. I ignored his twisted expression, as if returning every ounce of humiliation he had ever given me. It was just some childhood joke made by our elders, I said, my fingers lightly brushing the sparkling diamond on my ring finger. Did you really take it seriously? Furious, Danny lunged forward to grab my hand. But before he could reach me, a tall figure stepped in between us. Is this what passes for Brown family manners? Putting your hands on a woman? Tom's voice rang out, cold and sharp above me. I glanced through the gap between them and saw Danny's face flush a deep crimson. But with Tom standing there, he didn't dare retaliate. All he could do was pant heavily, trying to control his temper. My fiancé is here, I said calmly. Young Master Brown, why don't you get lost like you used to tell me to? More than once, Danny had forced me to dance before his rich friends, and when I tried to approach him afterward, breathless and vulnerable, he would push me away with those very words, get lost. Now, giving them back to him felt incredibly satisfying. To an outsider, it might have looked like Danny had lost his mind. He used to scoff at me, his so-called fiancé, while surrounding himself with a parade of women. But now, when I was the one to propose breaking off the engagement, he fought it with all his might, only for the matter to end in an ugly scene. Danny stormed off after swearing he'd never agree to the annulment. After all, our engagement had been sealed in front of both families. Now that I wanted out, my parents and grandfather had to step in and talk to Mr. Brown themselves. They told me not to worry and to rest at home. As for me and Tom, they didn't comment. The next few days felt like I was back in Tongcheng, living like a carefree heiress once more, until a strange phone number repeatedly called and shattered the peace. "Sis-in-law, please come quick," a voice pleaded. "Bro Danny's been drinking here for days." I hung up several times, but finally pieced together the situation from the caller's fragmented words. Danny had been drinking himself into oblivion at a bar, calling my name non-stop. Not wanting to turn a private matter into another scandal, I hesitated only briefly before grabbing my car keys and heading to the bar. As soon as I stepped inside, a familiar chubby man rushed over, drenched in sweat, and dragged me toward a private room. "Sis-in-law, if you don't come in now, bro Danny's gonna wreck my place." I yanked my arm out of his grip and said coldly, "There's no sis-in-law anymore. Danny and I have nothing to do with each other." The man standing before me, sweating profusely, was the same one who had once forced me onto the stage at Danny's request. "Jenny's the principal dancer, right? Wonder how she compares to the girls we've got here." Back then, he had mocked me while flicking the club lights over my head, his grotesque smile twisted in the flashing colors. Now, that same face was melting under the sweat, almost collapsing as he half-knelt to push me into the room. The lights inside were dim. On the sofa lay a man, completely unconscious. Hearing someone enter, Danny stirred, his eyes bleary. "Jenny. I thought you didn't want me anymore." When he realized it was me, he stumbled up and threw himself into my arms. The overwhelming stench of alcohol nearly made me gag. He had no strength left and was easily pushed aside. He fell to the floor, red-eyed, looking up at me with an expression so pitiful it overlapped with the child I remembered from long ago. "Young Master Brown," I said, my voice flat, "we're not together anymore. Who exactly are you putting on this show for?" He had never called me affectionately before, not even when I was still his fiancé. There had never been such intimate gestures either. Danny acted like he didn't hear me. Covering his face, he sobbed. "I know I'm not as capable as my brother, but I'll work hard and prove myself to you, Jenny. Please don't marry my brother, okay?" I blinked in confusion. "Your brother?" A wave of uncertainty washed over me. But with him dead drunk on the floor, I knew I wouldn't be getting any answers tonight. I called over a few staff members. They dragged Danny's limp body into a car, and I called a driver to send him home to the Brown family. Some truths, it seemed, had to come from Grandpa. When I returned home, Grandpa was in the garden, tending to his beloved plants. I told him what Danny had said, and he fell into a long silence before finally sighing and revealing the truth. "The one you were originally engaged to was the eldest son of the Brown family, John." From the regret in his voice, I could tell John must have been an extraordinary man. "We made a mistake," Grandpa admitted. "After John died, the engagement should have been cancelled. But back then, we had no connections in the capital, and our business was barely surviving." He set down his shears and sat on the stone bench in the garden. I remembered how Danny used to live with us when he was a child. He would shout all day about how he wanted to marry you. I thought maybe he truly liked you. So I figured, why not let him take John's place? Now that I finally understood the full story, everything made sense. Thinking back on all of Danny's erratic behavior since our engagement, I felt a lump in my throat. But his inner darkness was no excuse for the way he treated me. If this marriage had never been meant to happen in the first place, it was better to cut it off now than let it rot further. Grandpa told me that Mr. Brown had already agreed to cancel the engagement. From then on, the two families would part ways. "Jenny, your life shouldn't be sacrificed for the family's sake. From now on, do what your heart tells you." The setting sun painted the sky in glowing red, scattering warm light across the peaceful garden. My eyes welled up. The next morning, I was awakened by the sound of a car horn outside. I opened my window to see Tom leaning casually against his car, dressed in relaxed clothes, waving up at me. It had been a few days since we'd last seen each other. After a quick touch-up, I got into Tom's car. "So now that things with the Brown family are settled, isn't it time we talked about us?" I glanced at the man in the driver's seat, a trace of suspicion in my eyes. "There's an album in the compartment in front of you. Take a look, and you'll understand." I opened the cabinet as instructed and pulled out the photo album. As I flipped through the pages, I grew increasingly stunned. Each photo was a close-up of me from my various dance troupe tours. "At the time, I was overseas, thrown into training all alone," Tom said, voice calm as the car glided along the road. His profile was smooth and sharp, the soft shell of his ear tinged with pink. "Your troupe happened to be performing that day. I just wanted a quiet place to rest, and wandered into the show. A soft smile tugged at his lips as he spoke. You stood in the center of the stage, so bright and untouchable, you swept away all the gloom in my heart. Hearing that, everything suddenly clicked. So, that night at the bar, it wasn't a coincidence? I heard what Danny did to you, he said, eyes flashing. It almost made me lose my mind. While I was still processing his words, Tom pulled the car to a gentle stop. The door beside me opened. When I proposed to you that night, it wasn't just to help you save face, he said softly. It was from the bottom of my heart. He held out his hand to me. Behind him, through the open door, I saw a custom bridal boutique. If you don't mind, I'm willing to bring all I have and marry into the Reed family. I agreed, halfway. After all, with the massive empire that was the Miller family, even if Tom was sincere, our family wouldn't dare accept such a gift. News of our upcoming wedding spread quickly throughout the social circle. And because that world was so small, Danny's updates inevitably reached my ears. After the engagement was broken off, he had a huge falling out with Mr. Brown and ended up under house arrest. His cousin took over company operations. Soon after, people discovered irregularities in the contracts Danny had signed. It also came to light that Danny had sent women to accompanied business partners in order to maintain deals. Mr. Brown was so furious he fainted on the spot. When he woke up, he made the decision to exile Danny overseas, reduced to a powerless rich heir. Before leaving, Danny came to see me one last time. He no longer had the arrogance he once wore like armor. Clearly, the days under confinement hadn't been kind. I'm just unwilling to accept it, he said, voice hoarse. Why did my brother get groomed as the heir while I was left in Sea City like I didn't matter? I really did want to marry you when we were kids, but I didn't want to be his replacement. Danny's eyes were bloodshot, and he looked like he was holding himself together with every ounce of control he had left. That still doesn't justify what you did to me. I didn't look at him. I turned away without the slightest hesitation. He thought his feelings gave him the right to hurt me? His lonely figure as he walked away stirred nothing in me. Later that day, a servant informed me that the wedding dress had arrived. I went upstairs to try it on. Just as I opened the door to my room, someone pulled me in and slammed me against the wall, then kissed me before I could say a word. Seems like planning this wedding isn't keeping you busy enough, Tom said breathlessly, his eyes burning with jealousy. I just came up to try on the dress, I said weakly, a little guilty. After all, I didn't really have to go see Danny in person earlier. You shouldn't trouble yourself with small things like that. Leave it to your husband. His eyes sparkled as he scooped me up and tossed me onto the bed. I don't need to lie down to try on a dress. Alarm bells blared in my head as I scrambled upright. Sure. Let me handle it. I'm only weak because the beauty before me is too tempting, he whispered, barely holding on to his self-control. He pressed a button, and the curtain slid closed. The room was instantly cloaked in soft, seductive darkness. By the time I had finished trying on the dress, the sky outside was already pitch black. So this was what being in love felt like. It really did take stamina. My legs wobbled as I stood up, and I couldn't help sighing. Not long after our wedding, my parents and grandfather decided to return to Sea City to enjoy a quiet retirement. As for Tom, the once distant, elegant young master of Port City, he had completely abandoned his aloof persona. His office was now plastered with photos of the two of us. I resigned from my position as principal dancer due to painful memories. Besides, the wealth I had inherited from my family was more than enough for a lifetime, and my husband was more than capable. Tom gave me a cushy role at his company under the pretense of wanting to see me every day. But I didn't last long before returning home, because I was pregnant. Ever the doting husband, Tom didn't trust anyone else to care for me. He moved his entire office into our home just so he could be with me all day. That afternoon, I was lying in his arms, half dozing while he held a video call for work. The contract will be signed today, he told his team. You've all worked hard. I'm approving a full month of paid vacation. Cheers erupted from the computer speakers. After ending the call, Tom stroked my rounded belly with tender affection. You said you wanted to visit Northern Europe, didn't you? Since things are quiet at work, let's charter a private jet and take a trip. I agreed almost instantly. After the baby came, we probably wouldn't be able to travel for a long while. You're amazing, husband. I cupped his face in my hands and gave him a big kiss, just in case he changed his mind, and called for the servants to start packing. Tom bought a villa near a forest in Norway. When we arrived, it was summertime, not exactly hot, but the fruit trees left by the previous owners were heavy with ripe fruit. We spent our days picking fruit, relaxing, and occasionally indulging our cravings. When the weather was especially lovely, we'd walk hand in hand along the quiet coastline. Life was peaceful and warm. One day, while strolling aimlessly, we passed a bar filled with noisy laughter and shouting. The commotion drew my attention, and through the glass, I saw a familiar figure. Danny. He was downing a full bottle of liquor to the cheers of those around him. "There's a supermarket across the street," Tom said, gently guiding my waist. "Let's pick up some groceries and make hot pot tonight." "Sure," I said, pulling my gaze away. With his steady support, I walked slowly by his side. As for Danny, I felt nothing anymore, not hate, not sorrow, not even nostalgia. We were both doing just fine on our separate paths. And yet, I would always remember those quiet moments of childhood we once shared.